The Crucible Knights are the enemies who launched Square Table Gaming into the Elden Ring lore space. Our first video that the community really responded to was an early look at who the Crucible Knights were, how many of them there were, and where we could find them. Our first attempt was crude at best, but for whatever reason it resonated with Elden Ring fans at a time when creators were only interested in exploring the demigods. Months later, we went back and made a more accurate video, detailing everything we had learned as a community, and uncovering more of these enemies found in the lands between. With all that said, you can only imagine my excitement when exploring the Rao ruins and coming across a new Crucible Knight. One which did not belong to either of the factions we saw in the lands between. Devonia, the first Crucible Knight, is clearly the closest to the Crucible among her order, and today we're going to talk about why. Before diving into the story of Devonia, I wanted to take a second to talk about this week's sponsor on the channel, Antank. Antank offers a range of gaming accessories for PlayStation 5, Steam Deck, the ROG Ally, and Nintendo Switch. I purchased the Suicune Switch dock, and I have to say, I love it as both a new primary dock and aesthetic piece in my office. The minimalist design of this blue and red dock looks fantastic on the living room mantle, and now my regular dock can sit in the basement, where we have a more lived-in play space for my daughter. This new option comes with the same ports as a standard Switch dock, as well as a button on the back that allows you to switch between your TV and console. One thing I really love about this is the way that it makes the Nintendo Switch look much more like a display piece than a plugged-in console. Also, while I'm sure most don't have this problem anymore, if you're still using an older dock that has the tendency to leave scratches on your Switch's screen, this is a great option for keeping your console undamaged. This accessory is significantly more affordable than your standard Switch dock, and I can honestly say in my time with it, there's been no trade-off in quality for the lower price. Overall, this is a great budget-friendly option for either a replacement dock or an aesthetic upgrade to your gamer space. Make sure to use the code ANTANK to save 10% on your next order. Thanks again to Antank for sponsoring the channel, and with that said, let's get back to the story of the last Crucible Knight left in the Land of Shadows. It was thought there were only 16 Crucible Knights in existence due to old item descriptions that specified 16 Crucible Knights served Lord Godfrey. In fact, you can find all of these knights throughout the lands between if you look hard enough, and they all seem to have taken up arms for various factions. One serves Lady Tanith, while another fights on behalf of Radahn alongside a Leonine Misbegotten. Yet another defends the lowest part of Stormvale Castle, keeping watch over Godwyn's lineage. What's interesting about these enemies and their dedication to the Golden Order is that they're deeply tied to the primordial Crucible, meaning they were most likely shunned by Queen Marika. It was Elden Lord Godfrey that saw potential in their raw strength and brought them under his command, caring not about the reddish hue of their primordial gold, but rather their strength and what could be accomplished through it. Up to this point, we only knew of two named Crucible Knights that acted as Godfrey's generals, Ordovis and Cerulia, but now we've discovered another, a knight that goes by the name Devonia. Devonia is encountered in the Rao ruins as we make our way to the Church of the Bud. She carries a massive hammer, and her helmet utilizes hammer ornamentation. This stands in stark contrast to the rest of the Crucible Knights, as they were split into two factions, Ordovis' Axe Knights that wielded swords, and Celuria's Tree Knights, which wielded great spears. The symbols of these factions were straightforward. Godfrey was known for his axe, and the Axe Knights represented his strength. The Tree Knights were meant to portray the strength of the Erd Tree, and fight on its behalf. But Devonia's symbol was that of a hammer, which could only represent the blacksmithing practices of the Land of Shadow. From the beginning, she was set apart as having closer ties to this land than that of the Erd Tree, and her armor pieces tell us a little more about that connection. The Crucible Hammer Helm is described as the helm worn by Devonia, longest serving of the Crucible Knights. Holds the power of the Crucible of Life, the primordial form of the Erd Tree. It is said Devonia quested in search of the Crucible's origin, and departed from the lands of the Erd Tree alone. She also wields her own unique hammer, which is described as the Great Hammer wielded by Devonia, longest serving of the Crucible Knights. weapon forged of primordial gold, marked by its reddish hue and inhabited by ancient holiness. A torrent of life is engraved upon the striking face. This helm, along with her weapon, tell us how her connection to the Crucible was Devonia's top priority, which explains why we find her locked away in the Land of Shadow. As for why she's found in the Rao Ruins specifically, the aspect of the Crucible Thorn's incantation tells us. Remains of this, the primordial Crucible, can be seen in the ancient ruins. This place likely has the strongest connection to the Crucible in all the Land of Shadow. There is a question as to whether Devonia, or rather all Crucible Knights, are originally from the Land of Shadow. Personally, I believe this to be the case, as the Land of Shadow has significantly deeper ties to the primordial Crucible than the lands between. Worship of the Crucible was the way of the land, and those born with, or who developed, horns were seen as divine. We need only look to tutelary deities and the winding horns on their heads, or the divine beast dancing lions, to see how the creatures and aspects of the Crucible were revered by the Hornsen. Devonia's helm tells us she departed from the lands of the Erdtree alone, so it would seem that after whatever conquest these knights assisted Godfrey with, they were given a choice as to whether they would like to have a place in the new order established by Queen Marika and her first Elden Lord or not. Devonia chose to walk away, devoting herself wholly to the Crucible. This explains why she's the only Hammer Knight. Either she didn't stay in the lands between long enough to establish her own command and train other Hammer Knights, or those who followed her during that time eventually chose sides with either Ordovis or Cerulia. When we first see Devonia, she stands atop a rock, staring deeply at Enir Elim, which is still obscured by the sealing tree beyond the Church of the Bud. Perhaps she believes what she's been searching for can be found there, but has no way of reaching that holy place herself. Devonia will attack us on sight, and we see what kind of power she's cultivated over her time searching for the Crucible's origins in the Land of Shadow. She wields her hammer as if it were much lighter than it is, and can even use the spinning golden sword trick of Ordovis with this massive weapon. She can also use aspects of the Crucible, previously unseen to any of the Crucible Knights, that are clearly much more ancient in origin. Devonia is able to use Bloom, an aspect of the Crucible incantation that we can obtain for ourselves. Aspect of the Crucible discovered in the ancient ruins creates a Miranda flower on one's chest before calling down a rain of light. And an age long past, before this land was enshrouded in shadow, the vitality of the Crucible flourished. This attack sees a Miranda flower grow from the chest of its user, and as we all know, Miranda was a maiden of the Flower Crucible, which has more ancient origins than most of the creatures we can encounter. Devonia is also able to transform the lower half of her body into a literal beast with 4 hooves, a tail, and 2 large arms. What exactly this beast is supposed to be is unintelligible, as it seems to be an amalgam of creatures. This makes perfect sense for Devonia, as she was the Crucible Knight with the strongest ties to the primordial Crucible, and it's there that all life started as one. The creature that Devonia can transform her body into isn't actually one singular animal, but rather the strength of the Crucible in its purest form, with all life being an amalgamation. This is likely a power that Devonia uncovered through years of searching for the origins of the Crucible, and coming to a better understanding of just what lies beyond. As the longest-serving Crucible Knight, it's likely she herself was the one to start their order, meaning she would have access to secrets no other knight would. This explains her incantations, and the sheer strength of the lone Crucible Knight we can find in the Land of Shadow. It was likely a truly heartbreaking day for Devonia when she chose to leave her knights in order to continue their mission to hunt for the Crucible's origins, but another had come along who her compatriots chose to follow. They rejected the red gold of their order so that they might bask in honeyed rays under the command of the Golden Order's champion. Even so, the original Crucible Knight could not be swayed to stay under the employ of the Order. Her mission was too important. Her purpose was all-consuming. It matters not that she was trapped in the land of shadow, because she believed the truth she long searched for lay somewhere in these lands, and none would dare get in her way. Devonia survived for so long among the wreckage of this land, untouched by Messmer's flames. Perhaps she was spared because she once fought alongside the Elden Lord to establish the lands between. Or maybe, even Messmer recognized the strength of this knight, and feared what it would mean to cross her. This is all we can learn about Devonia, the singular Crucible Hammer Knight who watches from the Rao ruins, contemplating what to do next on her quest, trying to uncover a way to plumb the depths of the primordial Crucible, and truly understand the origin of all life. Thank you for joining us for this exploration of Devonia, the first Crucible Knight and only Hammer Knight. Do you believe Devonia once fought alongside her brethren to help Godfrey bring order to the lands between? Why is Devonia staring off towards Enir Alim when we find her? Was her quest to find the origins of the primordial Crucible always doomed? Or is her ability to transform into an amalgam of creatures proof that she completed her mission? Why do you believe the different leaders of the Crucible Knights were all named after different time periods? Will you take up the hammer to honor this lost faction of knights? Let us know your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell, and set notifications to all, so you never miss out on any of our lore dives. We look forward to seeing you again for more Elden Lore.